Hello everyone, my name is Samuel Esong and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is video number 5 in our DevOps series, and today we are going to talk about how to create virtual machines. We will try to go very slowly and also try to use simple terms. And because of the nature of our class, remember we said that we are going to use AWS. So even if you've not used AWS before, this video will still make sense to you. So by the end of this video, you will understand what EC2 really is, how a virtual machine is created in the cloud, how networking fits into all of this, and very importantly, how to stop and terminate your instance so you don't incur charges. Before we begin, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. And as always, it helps the channel grow. So in the previous video, we talked about virtual machines and we understood that virtual machines are computers that exist inside another computer. So now, the next question that will come naturally is, where do these virtual machines live? So, virtual machine lives in the cloud for the context of this class. And one of the biggest cloud provider in the world is AWS. So Amazon Web Service owns massive data centers filled with physical computers. So instead of you buying your own server, AWS lets you rent a small part of their computer. So inside AWS, this is how a data center looks like. The picture may not be clear enough, but data center has racks of servers stacked horizontally, and they are interconnected together and also networked together. So what is an EC2? Inside AWS, the service that lets you create virtual machines is called EC2. So EC2 simply means Elastic Compute Cloud. So it is primarily virtual machine. It is the virtual machine service of AWS. So whenever someone says, I launched an EC2 instance, what they are simply saying is, I created a virtual machine on AWS. I repeat again, whenever someone says, I launched an EC2 instance, so they are simply saying, I created a virtual computer on AWS. So why do people prefer EC2 instead of buying physical servers? We have already established the fact that virtual machines, you can isolate applications using virtual machine. So imagine you need a computer for testing or for learning. Buying hardware will be very expensive. Now with EC2, you can create a virtual machine in minutes, use it for a few hours or days, shut it down whenever you are done, and pay only for the time you used it. So you don't need to buy any expensive physical servers. So now, this flexibility here is the power of cloud computing. Now let us understand something. Before creating an EC2 instance, we need to understand on a beginner level what exactly is networking. So a virtual machine needs a network to communicate. So a virtual machine is useless if it cannot communicate. So just like your phone needs a network to browse the internet, a virtual machine also needs a network environment to send and receive data. So in AWS, networking is handled using something called a VPC. So in essence, every EC2 instance must live inside a VPC. So think of think of a virtual machine as your private neighborhood inside AWS. So inside this neighborhood, you place your virtual machines. You get to control who can come in. You also control how traffic flows. So in summary, every EC2 instance must live inside a network. Now, inside that VPC, there are smaller sections called subnets. So now, remember we use neighborhood as network. Now, think of subnet as streets inside that neighborhood. Now, some streets will allow access to the internet. Some are private and hidden. So, subnets are smaller sections inside your VPC. Now, basically, we have two types of subnets. We have the public subnet and we also have the private subnet. So now, placement your of this subnet determines if your virtual machine can talk to the internet. So in subsequent video, we are going to talk about networking in full, but for the sake of this video, we are going to stop here. Now, let us walk through the actual process of creating an EC2. First of all, you go to AWS console and log into your console. If you had set up an MFA, you'll be required to input your MFA. So MFA here also double is an extra layer of security for your AWS account. All right, guys, this is what my AWS console looks like. So the next thing is I'll go to this search bar and type EC2. So after clicking on EC2, I will come here and launch an instance. So clicking on launch an instance simply means I want to create a new virtual computer. So we are going to impute the name of the instance. These are just tags for you to quickly know your virtual machine after it is created. So let's assume I'm creating web server. I can use a conventional name, web server. So the next thing, AWS asks you to choose an operating system. You remember when we said that you can decide to run any type of operating system on a virtual machine. So we have Amazon Linux, we have Mac OS, we have Ubuntu, we have Windows, Red Hat, and if you should toggle this button here, you will see a whole lot of operating system. But for the purpose of this class, we will go with Ubuntu. So we select Ubuntu. So this is just like you choosing whether your laptop runs on Windows or Mac OS. So you are basically choosing what your virtual machine will run. So the next thing is the instance type. So since we are running on the free tier, I'm going with the T2 micro, which is eligible for free tier. So the next thing is to choose the key pair. So key pair is basically a security. Key pair is basically a type of security which we will use to authenticate to this virtual machine. So we'll create a new key pair by clicking on create a new key pair. We'll give it a name, let's say web server key pair. This key pair, we'll leave it at .pem, and this key pair should be very private. If anyone should have access to your key pair, rest assured that your server is compromised. So we'll create a key pair. It is going to auto download to our computer system. So the next thing is AWS asks us, which network do we want our machine to live in? Which subnet should our machine live in? And who is allowed to connect to this machine? This is where security group comes in. So think of security groups like rules at the gate. Who is allowed in? What type of traffic is allowed? What should be blocked? This is how AWS protects your machine. But for the purpose of this demonstration, we will use the default VPC. And in subsequent video, we will dive into VPC very proper. So we are not going to change anything here. We are going with the default VPC here. So the next thing, AWS asks us to configure storage. So this is where we determine how fast or how much memory we want our virtual machine to have. So for the purpose of this training, we are going to leave it at 8. So after everything, once everything is selected, you can choose the number of virtual machines you want to create with the same configurations, but I'll leave it at 1. Once everything is selected, you can click on launch your instance. So within seconds, AWS creates your virtual machine somewhere in a data center, and a physical server is now sharing its power with your AWS instance. So you can come to instance, select instance, and this is your web server. It has the running status and it is currently initializing. So with this, you officially have a computer running in the cloud. So you can now connect to the instance, install software. You can even practice Linux here. You can learn DevOps tools, but here is something very important to note. AWS charges for running instances. So when you are done practicing, you must stop the instance if you want to use it later, or terminate the instance if you are completely done. So terminating the instance here means deleting it completely. If you don't terminate the instance, you will incur charges. So it is not advisable to stop the instance, but rather terminate it. So this is one of the most common mistakes beginner makes. So to terminate your instance, you still highlight your web server, then come to instance state, then click on terminate. Terminate. So guys, always remember this rule. If you are done, terminate your instance. So AWS is a very powerful platform, but you must manage your resources very responsibly. So your instance is terminated. That means this particular virtual machine is not available for use again. So in summary, EC2 is AWS virtual machines, and VPC is the networking home for your virtual machines. So you get to manage your resources responsibly to save money. If you understand this, you are already building a very strong foundation in the cloud. If this video helped you, please subscribe, like, and comment. In the next video, we'll talk about connecting to EC2 instances and basic server interaction, step by step. See you on the next one.